Do we hear each other? Yeah, okay. Hello everyone once more, good morning. I'm privileged to have a role to moderate a panel about women in diplomacy. May I ask all our distinguished panelists to join us at the stage? Yes? Oh, well, I'm very grateful to Mr. Mosoti for very inspiring speech that we've heard. As you know, in fighting for gender equality, it's not enough only to have us women fighting, but we need men to support us. So today we have Mr. Mosoti as men's support at this panel. Thank you, Mr. Mosoti, for everything that you're doing. Personally, I'm becoming emotional because I see a lot of faces in public that I've worked through my life on the issue of gender equality. And there were so many phases of this process. But what I could tell you at the beginning is that we have a new adopted law on gender equality 2 years ago, that we have very impressive quotas, 40% of women on the lists at the elections. So we know the participation on the top level is very important. About diplomacy, what I could say is that for a long period, this occupation was exclusively reserved for men. I think that the awareness of necessity of involving women in this process and in this occupation is rising on a daily basis, and Serbia is now on around 20% of women ambassadors around the world. What I could tell you as the experience is that in UK, diplomatic corps has around 20% of women ambassadors. But let me come back to our panelists. As I have mentioned quotas, I would like to start with Mrs. Plamena Halačeva, Deputy Head of EU Delegation Mission. We are in front of EU parliamentarian elections. Could you tell us what are mechanisms, and are there any mechanisms of quotas according to the European Parliament elections?
Dobar dan svima.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on. Fantastic. Well, first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here and part of this panel, and not entirely female company. So yes, indeed, we are looking ahead with, I must say, with a bit of concern at the upcoming European Parliament elections. As you know, according to the latest projections, it's quite likely that far-right parties will have a bigger share of seats in the Parliament. And we do know that some of these European Parliament groups are represented at local, at national level with parties which have engaged in undermining some of the gender equality progress that we have made in the recent years. So we are watching this with concern. But to answer your questions, there are no quotas per se. There was a proposal by the European Parliament to include those, but this has not been agreed yet by the Council. This is, however, strongly encouraged by the European Commission to have gender quotas for the European Parliament elections. At national level, this is the case, from what I know, for 11 out of 27 member states. So there's some positive steps in this regard, but we're not there yet. And while I'm speaking about the EU, I just wanted to recall that, gender equality as such is at least as old as the European Union itself. I think it's really important that we remind that this is not a modern principle which is invented recently as part of the progressive woke culture. It's as old, I think, as the genders themselves. According to archaeologists, they have found traces that this also predates agricultural revolution. So this is a discussion we're having for at least 10,000 years. When it comes to the EU, this is really a founding principle. It's part of our Treaty of Rome from '57, so basically as old as the European Union. And our ambition on this has always been to really lead by example. Brankica Janković referred to some of the pioneering work when we were doing in terms of legislation, which I hope soon will also become part of the Serbian legislation, because all candidate countries need to transpose this legislation into their national core of legislative work. We're also leading by example by installing gender-responsive and gender-balanced leadership. Just to recall that for the first time we have a female president of the European Commission. For the first time we have a gender-balanced commission. And I think it's thus not a coincidence that this is the commission in the current mandate which delivered by far the most also in terms of directive when it comes to equal pay, when it comes to women on boards. We finally managed to accede to the Istanbul Convention, which is really we see as a historic accession. So I think that there is really a very strong link between gender-balanced and gender-responsive leadership and the actual work we can do in advancing women's rights.
Thank you. We have here some real experts in global terms speaking. One of them is Mrs. Milana Rikanović, UN Women, from Tajikistan to Serbia. One of your colleagues, I have to mention that, from Bosnia-Herzegovina, stated the other day that we won't need 100 and something years, but we will need 300 years to reach full gender equality. And we would need $360 billion invested in that project. So I would like to ask you, how do you see this long process? I mean, it's projected globally. It probably won't be the same all around the world. But you have a lot of global experience. As I said, you were in Tajikistan and elsewhere. So how could you compare, you know, those different stages and positions of gender equality around the world? And how could you compare it with Serbia?
Thank you very much for the question. Welcome to everyone. And I'm very, very delighted that I'm in such a distinguished panel. When we talk about gender equality, we see huge leaps of advances, and at the same time, huge steps backwards. So the road is not that straightforward. The opportunity to gather so many powerful women leaders today, but across the globe, has been so timely and critical. Today and this week is Commission on the Status of Women happening in New York, where delegations across the world are gathered together to discuss how can we improve gender equality and how can we make sure that the status of women is improved. And what we see and what you have already shared is that statistics is not something which is going in our favor, including in Serbia. Literally in every area of life, we see this, women are in disadvantaged position. From the economic position, women are more exposed to poverty. They own less property. Women in Serbia are less employed. They are less active. They are discriminated in the labor market. But not just that. Violence against women is not decreasing. On the contrary, it seems that it's increasing. Women, peace, security is in the agenda, which is now so critical, especially during the time of crisis. And I must say that now the crisis seems like a normal term, started with COVID-19 to energy crisis, to war in Ukraine and evolving conflicts around the world. And I think that women leadership is critical in this regards. We have seen that the women leadership is based on human rights-based approach, in leaving no one behind and taking care of everyone. And we have witnessed that during COVID pandemics, when the countries such as New Zealand is done better than some other countries, we hope it's about women leadership. So when we look at how the gender equality is going across the world, I think we have to do much more. When we talk about Serbia, again, we have to do much more. We do have very advanced legislation, and we are having a huge steps in that regard. But reality is not changing, and that's something we have to find a way to trickle down. And UN Secretary General just a few days ago asked for more women in the leadership position, not just in the governments, but in financial institutions, because gender equality costs. And the theme of this year, Commission on the Status of Women, is invest in women, because this investment will pay off not just to the women, but to the communities, family, and society as a whole. How to respond simply to the question, where are we and what are the international experience? There is no simple question. But what we have to do is to put forward and put at the center of everything we do gender equality, women's empowerment, leaving no one behind, and inclusion.
Oh, thank you. You have mentioned something really important, that legislation is not the only necessity. We need implementation is sometimes even more difficult than to reach that legislation. Your Excellency, Silvia Davidou, Ambassador of Romania in Belgrade, I have experienced around the world, I was in contact with many diplomatic corps, is that Romania is having a tremendous number of women diplomats. That's maybe wrong impression, but I've met a lot of them. So I wanted to ask you, how did you manage that? And on the other hand, I wanted to ask you about your experiences in Belgrade Diplomatic Corps. How many women are there? Are you networked? Because networking is very important. For example, in London, we had a network of women ambassadors. We had a WhatsApp group, so we exchanged messages on a daily basis. Romanian colleague led that group, by the way. Is there any kind of similar initiative here about networking?
Hello, thank you for having me today here. To start with the first part of your question, yes, indeed, we are 56% of the diplomats in the Romanian ministry.
So it was not just my impression.
No, but they are goods and bads. We are the majority in managing positions, but it took us quite a while to so to say, to spring to the state secretary level. It took a while to get to those positions. And we have the second minister female in our history, recent history. I'm excluding the one that was in the early 50s, which was, you know,
we haven't managed that yet.
Yeah. So actually my minister is my colleague. She is a diplomat, and she's the first lady in this position, which brings us to another level. It's a very simple and very tragic, if it were, it's a bit funny, but it's tragic in the end. Why we are having this proportion of women diplomats is the fact that in the 90s and the years 2000, we were less well paid than the private sector. And all the former colleagues, the young boys that joined the ministry in the 90s with enthusiasm, have left for better paid jobs. But we have shown resilience, and we have stayed, and we have survived. And I think we are rewarded now with the fact that we are in the majority. Probably the proportion of ambassadors is not as high as with the proportion of diplomats, but we are increasing. And at this moment, London, Paris, and Berlin are women ambassadors for the first time. I was in my previous posting the first Romanian female ambassador to Austria. I mean, I looked at 160 years of diplomacy in the former capital of Habsburg Empire, and okay.
You were in Ireland as well, weren't you?
I was in Ireland as well. And here is my third ambassadorial post. We don't have a network of women ambassadors, or not even women diplomats. I'm not aware of that. But we are increasing in number. I mean, since I came 3 years ago, I think we have doubled. At least in the EU group, we are more than I could have imagined. I've served previously in Norway, where, you know, the Nordic countries is a policy in itself to have women well represented. And there was a network of female ambassadors. And I was told, because I was not part of it, I was not ambassador there, my husband was, I was told that they were the best informed diplomats in the capital. I mean, if you wanted to find out something very, very special, you ask the group. They will be the first one to know. So maybe we should take the initiative and organize such a superior group of superior network. But I would like to think that we are good because we are equal, not because we are having this special network. And that was been my motto since I started in the ministry 32 years ago, so what a lifetime.
If that will be one of the results of this panel, I will be more than delighted to share some ideas. Monika Podsklanova Šuhajdova, Deputy Ambassador of Slovakia. Well, I would like to share some other topic with you. You know, the role of women in representing their countries, not only in diplomacy but even higher. Recently, the other day, it was opened the exhibition in Belgrade, Zuze in Belgrade, and then you have fantastic examples of enormously successful Slovak women in Serbia with naive painting. Like Plamena Halačeva, and I think that those kind of very strong voices of women in culture are really helpful about diplomacy. So, how do you see the role of those women?
First of all, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to speak in this panel in front of so many inspiring women that I had the opportunity to meet myself in their different capacities. As you're mentioning, the women in culture or in naive art painting, it in certain way depicts the way how women find their way to the different leadership position. For myself, the way to diplomacy and through my career was not easy if it would just float through the men of politics. So I think that we are kind of way preconditioned to find sometimes our other ways around. Mm-hmm. I started, for example, as a UNICEF young ambassador. I tried to do a lot of promotion to through sports and working with young people. So the culture could be also one of the ways how the women showed their best. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. Mr. Mosoti, you have, you're one of the supporters, that's very obvious. Thank you for that. But how does it look like in your organization? I mean, in UN system, is there any pattern or quotas? I mean, it's very difficult because you have a lot of countries involved, but is there any gender balanced rule in the UN system as such?
The simple answer to that question is yes. And I think one of the progress, and Milana would always, I think, support this, is one of the progress that has been made, especially with the current Secretary General, is prioritizing women joining the system, and especially a leadership position. We did hit 50% some years ago of all top positions for women, which I think we believe that would be able to transform the position of women within the UN. At the lower cadres, there are, I think, a lot more women than there are men. But I think the main issue really is that whereas at the very top we have 50% and we have a lot of women represented in organizations, if you look at positions of decision making, you know, when you have leaders like Milana, myself, and others at that level going up, still men outnumber women. And I think that is where work needs to be done a lot more. But even more importantly, beyond the numbers, what we need men to be able to understand that these are not favors they are doing women, especially when they are being hired into organizations, because sometimes what happens is they feel like you're only employed because you're a woman, and not because you've got the capabilities and the strength of being there in your own right as a competent and hardworking woman who would be able to support the organization. I 100% believe in women leadership. Our organization, UNFPA, is led by a woman who's been phenomenal, Natalia Kanem, and we have diversity, both when it comes to gender, but also on other aspects of diversity. I think probably the most progressive organization within the United Nations in terms of integrating different capacities, and that has indeed translated into, I think, better outcomes for the organization. But I wanted also to draw my experience from, I served my country in New York for 10 years as the diplomatic circles. And this work, when we began, it was really difficult. And when you talk about these things in the early 2000s, it wasn't the most palatable of topics to be able to engage, and we used to pay lip service to some of this work, and I used to represent the third committee. The third committee is the one that looks at gender, humanitarian, social issues, and some of the more difficult issues that we need to talk about. And it was easy for us, and even now as UNFPA, we could talk about this, but please, if you allow me, I just want to carry out a small survey in this room because it's really important for us to be able to do this. Are you ready? It's a small survey, but really it relates about empowerment of women and boys, women and girls, boys and men. By raising your hand, how many of you, of course, have had discussions with your brothers or with your sons or with your partners about issues of menstruation? I'm impressed, really. And not by a passing glance, but really having a discussion. How many of you have had discussion with your brothers, with your sons, about issues of contraceptives? Oh, it's much less, right? I can see it's much less. But how many of you have had proper discussions on violence against women, specifically? Not generally, not violence generally, but violence against women. Good. Now, this is the best. How many of you have had discussion about sex with your sons, daughters, brothers, partners? How many of you have had that discussion? Oh, it's truly impressive. It's truly impressive. No wonder you're CEOs. Clearly, your leadership is very good. But you would be surprised, but there were quite a number of hands still that were down. And basically because some of these things are taboo issues. And UNFPA, part of the challenge that we have, that the mandate is so challenging, is that we are so intrusive. We get into your bedrooms, we get into your body, we get into difficult places where you don't have whole discussions about this. And I think one of the most prominent things that you can ever do, especially when it comes to the self-esteem of girls, to be able to navigate their agency and to be able to navigate that choice and that freedom to decide freely things that happen in their own body. When we talk about, these are not easy issues. Because if you do not have this discussion with them and you know this, they will get it from the internet. And they'll get it from their friends. And they'll get it from crazy books and rumors and discussions and TikTok. TikTok is very good about these things. But the information is not accurate. So we are about 100 people in here. We can actually do better by spreading that information and talking to your friends, and let's talk about these things. Those very difficult topics, let's have a discussion, and that is how we build leadership in girls, so that if they are able to negotiate and to navigate through their bodies, sexuality, violence and all that, it's very powerful. They will grow up and they will be so phenomenal about this. With all the hands that I've seen raised, I'm surprised why almost 1 in 2 women have experienced violence in Serbia, one form of violence or another. Those are damning statistics. Almost 1 in 2 women in Serbia have experienced one form of violence or another. We have to do something about it. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, you started with some surveys. Now I'll ask my panelists freely just to say a number. There has been an EU gender equality survey for 2023 about EU member states. We are on our EU path. EU is our strategic foreign policy goal. On the scale from 0 to 100, European Union is on the number of 70 concerning gender equality. The country with the highest score is Sweden with 80. So we could say that it is maybe a good result, but on the other hand, if that's developed part of the democracy in the world, I would like to, I mean, we should maybe expect even more. But I would ask you, how would you say what's the level of gender equality in Serbia and in your country? Let's start from you.
Thank you very much. I have some statistics and some data right in front of me. That date back, I think, to 2022, but definitely that time Slovakia was not standing very well on. We were almost at the bottom of the EU average on the 24th place, and on the globally on the 77th place. But since then, I think the situation has improved. Since 2021, we have a dedicated coordinator task to shape ministries' policies, and we see it as a part of a larger agenda, assuring equal opportunities, diversities, and inclusion. And the first and the most important step was to put this agenda on the spotlight and to ignite discussion about the issues that has been overseen and without the real discussion for quite a long time. So although the situation is not ideal, I think it is improving. And what is important that our ministry stood at the forefront in the whole state administration to set as an example further. As for the women representation, it was recently on the International Women's Day that our ministry released a press release stating that women make up to 51% of people in the leadership in our ministry. But if you break down this data, we will come to the information that at the lower leadership positions, at the head of departments, we have over 50%, but as higher we go, especially in the core business, in the politics, the less women we meet. And on the ambassadorial level, it's less than 18%, so we still look up to Romania.
Plamena?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think quickly on the statistics, I mean, in terms of management positions in the Commission, we are now at more than 48% for women. We are at 40% in our diplomatic service, which is the European External Action Service where I work. And in the Parliament, we have 40% of female MEPs, which makes it actually one of the most gender-balanced assemblies in the world. But then when you break down a little bit the numbers, then you see that there is still quite of a gender disparity, for example, within the committees. Our Foreign Affairs Committee, I think, which is quite telling, it's 85% composed of men, wow. Which I think circles back about the role of women in diplomacy. Because we know that most of our member states' Ministry of Foreign Affairs opened the diplomatic service to women less than a century ago. And until the 70s, in many countries, including our own member states, we had the so-called marriage bans. So you had to choose, either you're a diplomat or you can have a family. This was in place even in Sweden until in the 70s. So I think we have come a long way. I wanted to share a little bit my experience, if you allow me, I think it's quite telling about my experience in Serbia so far in the region, because I've been here for 1.5 years. And a number of times, for people who are meeting me for the first time, usually the question I get is, "Vi ste zamenik šef delegacije Evropske unije?" Which means, you are the deputy head of delegation? I had a similar experience in Montenegro where I was heading our political section, where upon arrival with meetings or events, I would be rushed, sometimes even forcefully, to back rooms before I have the chance to explain that I'm not the interpreter. And in all these occasions, more often than not, this was done by women. Women, very often looking like me. And I think it's because we would subconsciously actually perpetrate these stereotypes about women without even thinking about it. And at the beginning, I was really taking it personally. I was like, come on, I have 15 years of experience in the European institutions. This is now my 4th diplomatic posting in the Western Balkans. Why people not taking me seriously? I was taking it personally. And then I realized it really has little to do with me personally. I think it really has to do with our mental image of what an EU diplomat should look like, what a new diplomat should sound like, or diplomat in general, doesn't need to be a diplomat. Because I think all of us, we have this mental image, I suppose, forged by literature, the film industry, about a diplomat. And I think we all have in mind this Henry Kissinger type figure, you know, a white man with silver hair, ideally with glasses. So anything which questions this, I think, mental image puts us out of our comfort zone. And last week we had a panel with 4 female diplomats in our info center, and it was quite striking because we were all talking about the importance of role models. And I think this is the key. This is the key also to change our mental image of what a diplomat or EU diplomat should look and sound like. And I think that somebody mentioned this in the introductory remarks, that we really need to allow ourselves to be, not to continuously strive to conform with people's expectations. And that's why I also find my 40s very liberating, because I think that now I allow myself to speak more openly my mind, and also to give my own interpretation of what a EU diplomat should be. So now I allow myself also to wear bright colors, dance in public, because this is, I think, important also in how we perceive and also the example we give to the next generations.
Well, you've provoked me to say something earlier than I intended to about experiences. I could tell you my experience in UK, which is highly developed democracy, isn't it? Well, prejudices are so high all over that you can't even imagine. When I arrived to London, of course, no one knew me. I was with my husband. And at every single reception, people would approach him, asking him, "Where are you from?" And he would say, "I'm from Serbia." And they would say, "Oh, Your Excellency." So it was a bit embarrassing for him, because he had to explain, well, it's not me, it's her. And 3 times, it was funny, you know, we laughed. 4th time, I've got furious. I thought, well, is there something on my face saying it can't be me? What's the problem? The problem are prejudice. I mean, everyone has that role model. He is the ambassador, not me. After this, I mean, I would really kindly ask you to say something about prejudice, but then I'll add one more thing when we finish this circle. Please, Milana.
EU is preparing something called Gender Equality Index, which is for the EU member states. Serbia is the one country, as EU accession country, preparing it for the first time. I'm very grateful for that. But this is the indication of both the trends over the years, because now we have prepared the Serbians for the first time, and as well we can compare ourselves with EU countries. It's measuring domains of power, time and money, health, education, violence against women. And I'm sure you can guess that in the area of power, we are scoring a bit better than some of the European countries. And the reason for that is very simple: quotas. Quotas are critically important to increase the number of women in parliament, in elections, and these are the results of the thought of many generations of women activists, women parliamentarians, politicians, our colleagues here He was one of the leaders of that. What is the challenge with that is that numbers are not the only thing. We have to have women and men alike who are fighting for gender equality. And although women do have rights to be left-oriented, right-oriented, to be traditional, to be whatever they want, increasing the number of women would assure and enable us to make sure that women that are in the decision-making positions are fighting for gender equality, not against it. Second area where we are scoring very low in comparison to even countries in the region is the area of time and money. And time is showing that women in Serbia are spending each day 2.5 hours more on unpaid care work than men. And UN Women has supported the coordination body last year, measuring how much this all unpaid care work costs. And it's 21.5% of GDP. And you know, it's billions. So women are creating value, tremendous value for the families, for the society, which is not valued at all, as a matter of fact. It's taken for granted. And if we transfer it into the funds, it was even calculated that if we are paid for this kind of work, it would be something like 500-600 euros per month. And no one is asking that women are paid for taking care of kids or doing some homework, but we do want that men do that work alike. So it's not only on the burden of women. In the area of education, this is as well an area measured by EU. We are scoring well, but again, there is a huge segregation in the education system. So we have the whole social sector dominated by girls, and the engineering, STEM, IT, fast-growing areas dominated by boys. And later, that is transferred to the business, to the employment, and one of the explanations why there is such a difference in money, if we are having so many girls in the low-paid and low-valued sectors, then in the future, when they are employed, they would earn less if they are not in IT or STEM or something like that. Area of health is something which is in average, and it's not showing trends of going better or worse, but in general, the area of health is somehow going especially having in mind COVID and all of the crises and the way we are working. So, and the final area is, which is measured across Europe, is violence against women. And it goes without saying, violence against women is something targeting only women because they are women. And it has socioeconomic effects, it has political impact, it has mental health impact, it has participation impact, employment impact, and basically the number of reporting of violence is increasing. We can argue whether the violence is increasing or women are more empowered to report violence, but still the femicide is not decreasing, and that's something which is very worrisome for all of us.
Well, concerning education in Europe, as far as I know, there are more educated women than men at this point, but it became again a kind of problem because of relations between men and women concerning education. So, Mrs. Davidou.
Unfortunately, I don't have figures, but I can tell you this one aspect where Serbia is miles away from Romania, and I congratulate you from this point of view, women in politics. We have less than 19% of women in the parliament, and so far I think there are only 3 ministers. We have been worse, but we have been better. But it's a question of a tradition. I don't know what's the explanation. There are several. We have very little appetite for women in politics, or women have very little appetite for politics. On the other side, we have the highest number of women CEOs, and even the first 10 companies in Romania were dominated by women CEOs at a certain moment. That's good. And yesterday I read something that was very, very pleasant to read. The average salary for women was higher in Romania than for men. So.
Oh, good, good. Yeah. You're doing great.
They are better prepared, they have better positions, and they earn more. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Mr. Mosoti has to leave us. Before you leave us, I have 2 questions for you. You said you're coming from New York. Well, you said you're coming from New York. Yeah, that you live there. When could we expect in USA president, female president? In fact, what's the situation with the gender equality in US? That's one of my small questions. And another one would be your advices for women in the world.
Thank you. The first question is impossible for me to answer for many reasons. Obviously, as a United Nations official, I try to desist from some of the political aspects. But you all know what is going on, and I want to answer the second question. Perhaps you would be able to reflect on the first question. And in that regard, I really want to quote Martin Niemöller. Some of you know who was writing in the last century. And Martin Niemöller spoke that they first came for the socialists, and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the unionists. I did not speak up because I'm not a unionist. Then they came for the Jews, but I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. When they came for me, no one stood up because there was no one left. Everybody else had been taken. And even in this environment that we are speaking right now, we see a lot of pushback, including in that country, in the United States, a lot of pushback on some of the advances that we've made in the world on gender. You know, first they came for the sex and we didn't pick up because it's a private issue that happens individually. And then they came for all these terms, and then we said, no, they don't apply to me because we are doing all these things. Now they are coming for gender. Now gender, the term gender is so offensive that they want to get rid of it. Of course, you're going to say, look, I'm a woman, I'm a man, so I do not understand what gender is. Eventually, they are coming for you. So as there is a push for conservatism and taking us back 100 years where we came from, we have to arise, we have to stand up, and we have to say no. Because these are some of the things that have shaped the leaders such as yourselves and the leaders that Plamena and Milana and all the ambassadors were talking about. This is what has actually made us the advances that we've made to where we are right now. So if you're not going to talk about gender, you're not going to talk about women, they're going to talk about some of things that are taking us back to the kitchen where women belong. Remember, it will be too late if you do not stop them now. So it doesn't matter whether it's the United States or in any other country, and I've lived in the United States more than 20 years. The danger is everywhere, that even advanced economies can fall back and fall out of some of the most pertinent, most progressive issues that we've made. Watch out. They will come for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And hope that we will have a chance to continue these conversations in the future as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. We will continue. We will continue a little bit more our discussion. We are far behind our schedule. I would have to ask organizers how much more do we have. We are still not 1 hour, but 10 minutes. Okay. Well, I would continue. I like those topics of prejudice, and then there is a question of language. There is huge debate in Serbia about gender-sensitive language, about occupations. In some languages, it's very simple. You know, in German language, it's feminine and masculine noun for every occupation, for example. But even meaning of words is different. I will give you an example. If you would say, ambitious man, what do you think? It's man with a positive attitude towards his life, with a positive agenda, goals that he wants to achieve. So overall impression is very positive when you say ambitious man. What is the impression when you say ambitious woman? Bitch. I have to say that. Sorry for that, but I've experienced that a lot in my life. Am I an ambitious woman? Yes, I am. I'm very proud about that. But people are thinking that that's not good. So I would like to ask you maybe some of your personal examples, or how should we fight that? But because it's about stereotypes, it's about prejudice, and it's very difficult. Maybe education is key for such kind of very complex issues. Please.
Yeah, if you ask me about my mental picture associated with ambition woman, it will be a woman with a high self-esteem, self-confident, probably with a good education and with a clear aim where to go. And this is probably thanks to the fact that in my professional career I've been surrounded exactly by this kind of woman. Although it's paradoxical that in my career it's been men who helped me and who promoted me and led me through, navigated me through my career. But if we go back to the stereotypes, I would like to emphasize one point, that it is crucial and important to work to address the systemic obstacles and that prevent women from advancing even at the level of education. And here I share one anecdote with you. I was studying international relations and diplomacy, and we will almost equal share girls and boys at that time. And it was a lecture of macroeconomics led by quite a well-known professor, who made just a comment in the middle of the lecture that you women, you realize what's your task here? You are here present only to find your future husband diplomat. And you know what happened? Not all of women, but a vast group just raced and left the hall. And those are now successful women in commerce, in arts, in diplomacy.
Great example. Plamena.
Thank you very much. I have an example of a very similar word, which is not ambitious but assertive, because all these figures that I've referred to earlier in terms of important progress when it comes to achieving more equality in management positions, this is really not based on positive discrimination, because for actually all management positions we have highly competitive procedures. So for every single post we actually need to apply together with many other candidates, as was for example the case for this post and a previous post that I had applied for. So in my career I had one unsuccessful interview, and when I actually sought feedback after that why I was not chosen, the answer I got was, you were too assertive. And I actually dwelt a little bit on that, because it's a post which I really thought that I'm really well qualified. It was about the Western Balkans. I already had, most of my career was on the Western Balkans. And I really wanted the post. I even did some of this internal trainings about how to perform the interview. And then the advice which is given to you is always, you have to go and show that you believe that you are the best person for that job. But then I realized this is an advice given by men to other men. Women were judged differently. We need to show that we want the job, that we are the best qualified, that we want it, but there is still, how to put it, we still leave the overall assessment to the panel, not to ourselves.
Very good example, yeah.
Yes.
I completely recognize it.
I'm not sure I would come up with a personal experience, but I do want to reflect on what do we need to change the gender stereotypes. And I have to say that it requires a life cycle approach. All the stereotypes has some ground sometimes in the past, and we used to see only men at the construction sites. Logically, we would assume these are men's work. Stereotypes transform into prejudice and eventually into discrimination. And how can we fight that? Well, having more women at the construction work, having more women at the leadership position, having them showing from the young girl age to the younger women's age, then to the adult age, that we are the role models who are fighting structural barriers, the structural obstacles we are having. We do see that it's so critically important, because it's not just about stereotypes, how someone perceives you. That has the real implication in the policies, practices, and our experience are showing that there is a pay gap, that we have a segregation in the labor market, that we do have still women and men work at home, who would be the one taking care of the babies, who would be the one driving the kids to the various trainings, which is now kind of the common practice. So fighting stereotypes starts from the very early age, and for that we have to have the mothers who believe in gender equality, who are fighting stereotypes, who are not allowing stereotypes to become prejudice, and then we as a society have to fight gender-based discrimination.
Thank you. Your Excellency?
I will start the other way around with an example from my early career that could have been crucial for me, but hopefully, or thank God, it went well. I was refused a posting abroad because I was unmarried. I was 25, 3 years in the ministry, early 90s. And the point is that the one that has refused me was the ambassador that was my former professor at the university. And he told me, simple, you are not going to be concentrating on your job because you are going to look for a husband. I proved him wrong. I married 12 years later. So I had my career as I wanted, and I think that's the best, so to say, revenge, to shape your own life without letting the others dictate you. It could have been easy to give up and marry in haste only to be posted abroad, but I think I took the right decision at that time. But still, there are a lot of prejudices, even nowadays. I've witnessed the same, my husband being ambassador like me, and we are together here in a different position. But there, I noticed the temptation. Some colleagues are going to him first to talk about very serious business. And then, okay, in the end, because he declines the capacity, they are coming to me. But that's it.
Well, unfortunately, the prejudices are present all over. Well, unfortunately, some of our panelists, more of our panelists have to leave, and as we are really behind the schedule, I would like to express my gratitude for your participation today. I think that we had really interesting discussion about the messages for future generations. I completely do agree with you. I have 2 daughters. We are working on daily basis on the messages, on prejudice, and I'm always trying to pay attention to them. Well, here is a trap for you. So, in diplomacy, things we could conclude that things are getting better, but we are far away from reaching our goal. So, my dear ladies, we have to continue fighting. All the best to all of you. And let's continue what we started a long time ago. We are ready to fight. We've proven that. All the best.